We're seeing both the mayor of Minneapolis as well as the governor, Tim Walz, have spoken with the president. They are saying things like, we are on the same wavelength, as well as seeing productive conversations with Tom Homan, the border czar. What are your thoughts?
This is something that we have been calling for since the very beginning, when the ICE raids started happening, and then everything that was happening, that dark cloud that I said was hanging over Minnesota. I said what we needed to do was get President Trump, Tim Walz, whoever it was, the mayor, to actually do their job, get in a room and meet together. This is no longer partisan. I think maybe that red line got passed with this last death that happened on the streets of Minneapolis. Now, again, of course, people are going to be highly polarized. They're going to have a lot of questions and a lot of reasons. But of course, you actually saw for the first time, maybe even some of those that were more on the conservative side say, you can't be going out and saying because someone has a weapon that they are, in fact, a criminal before those crimes took place and deserved somehow to die. I think that this is a moment of reflection for a lot of people in the conservative movement. And I think President Trump knows it. And I think he sees it himself. Why else would he be meeting with people who he essentially has called his enemy very, very many times, including the governor of Minnesota, who, of course, was running against him as vice president last go round. So this is not, people that are friendly necessarily with each other, but he can read the room. He can see this getting chaotic. We know that they have called to de-escalate what's happening on the streets.
Now that they have reached this kind of tipping point and are willing to speak to someone from the administration, they're saying, oh, it seems like we may not agree on everything, but we can work this out and we can de-escalate this and move forward. Ignoring the fact that their policies were what escalated it, and they're calling on their own citizens, weaponizing their own citizens against the federal government is what got us to that in the first place. But I just wanted to see the Rick Grinnell-style diplomatic sit-down seems to be working here.
Look, we can't be afraid to talk to people that we disagree with. I think it's really important that we get back to that. In America, we've really lost the ability to talk. We go on social media and just bombard each other with statements, and nobody's really listening. I love talking to people that disagree with me. As long as everyone is calm, you wait your turn and then share what you believe. And maybe when it's not your turn and you're listening, maybe you learn something. But we got to get back to having respectful dialogue. And I think this is what President Trump just did. He called up the governor of Minnesota, or spoke to the governor of Minnesota, and was able to kind of openly share, look, what we're trying to do is remove criminals from your community. Surely you can agree with that. If you don't like the tactics of how it's unfolding, then let's talk about the tactics. But we both share the goal of removing people who are problems in society, who are creating chaos, who are making our communities unsafe.
I think what you've got here is a situation, and this is something that you and I were concerned about and that we've talked about a lot, is that, it wasn't as if the people calling to resist ICE and to get out in the streets were community organizers or liberal activists. It was the governor of the state himself that was labeling the federal law enforcement officers as the Gestapo, as fascists, and making that rhetoric amplified. But then not just saying, I will I will deploy the National Guard, I will deploy the state police, I will deal with this. It was, in fact, him that was telling his own citizens to get out there and do that. That is weaponizing your own constituents, weaponizing and putting in harm's way your people. It's one thing if saying, I applaud those that are speaking out, but he was continuing to push this. There's also stuff that have come out about this Signal chat where there were thousands of people, including people high up in his administration, coordinating a lot of these activities, not with officials of the state, but with citizens themselves. And I think some of that responsibility falls on these leaders that are willing to put their citizens in harm's way and use them as a political pawn. And that's what we've seen quite a bit here. We've seen the usage of the citizens as political pawns, and that has led to the death of 2 Americans.
Yeah, and I think at this point, there was even a lot of references to Nazis to Anne Frank, that people would be reading about this the same way they read about Anne Frank. And there are moments that I feel like you can talk about these kind of things. Whenever you start invoking Holocaust type rhetoric, though, I think a lot of people, specifically in the Jewish community, start to back up a little bit and go, okay, hold on. This is not the same thing. Anne Frank was, in fact, a citizen of the country who was being targeted because of her ethnic background / religious beliefs. And you start talking about Anne Frank in that situation, and it becomes more and more hostile. I mean, it was Holocaust Remembrance Day yesterday. We even had people on the conservative right and look high up that seemed to be afraid to use words like Jewish or talk about the importance of Israel. We're still dealing with a lot of that in today's society. And what I'd like to hear from you, Will, is there seems to be, and look, I'm here out of state right now, and I'm listening to a lot of local radio or local television. There seems to be a breath of fresh air from Tom Homan, that Tom Homan is who people are celebrating right now as potentially the savior in this situation. And I don't think any of us really predicted that, but I guess it's because he has a history of working with other administrations.
Well, and I think, Logan, that's the problem. The left demonized Tom Homan when he was brought on as border czar because he's a serious official. And he had a long career working with Border Patrol, with the Department of Homeland Security, and had even gotten awards under previous administrations like Barack Obama for his work. But because he worked with President Trump, he was demonized. But now all of a sudden, he's like the peacemaker. He's the broker of this. But this is a post he put out on X that says, "Today I met with Governor Walz, Mayor Frey, and the top law enforcement officials to discuss the issues on the ground in Minnesota. We all agree that we need to support our law enforcement officers and get criminals off the streets. While we don't agree on everything, these meetings were a productive starting point, and I look forward to more conversations with key stakeholders in the days ahead. President Trump has been clear. He wants American cities to be safe and secure for law-abiding residents, and they will be." But once again, that is what we are seeing out of serious leaders like Tom Homan, someone that was demonized by the left as being a radical for wanting to control the border. And you see that statement is not something far-fetched. You're also seeing the mayor himself saying that he and the chief of police met with border czar Homan and had a productive conversation. Because once again, when you do sit down and realize that the federal government has authority to do things and the state has the ability to not get in the way and make this chaos where citizens die, then you start to see a different story. And it was all done for political games in Minnesota.